speed. Get ready for rush hour.
Hostage. He's using her for cover. He's almost to a plane. You're 100 feet away.
What do you think?
Bomb's already taken out cables. Bomber wants $3 million or he blows the emergency brakes.
Anything else that'll keep this elevator from falling?
The basement.
Any time.
Will the mystery guest please sign in?
Why are they messing with me? Do they think I'm doing this for fun?
Tell me again, Harry, why did I take this job?
Come on, 30 more years of this, you get a tiny pension and a cheap gold watch.
Cool.
The game began.
Some close calls, huh?
When someone put the city of Los Angeles to the ultimate test.
Pop quiz, hotshot. There's a bomb on a bus. Sure? Yeah, why?
He's the only solution.
We just got a ransom demand from you, Terry.
Where do you think?
Stay on or get off.
Get off.
This is much better.
Keanu Reeves, Dennis Hopper, Sandra Bullock.
Pop quiz. Hair trigger aimed at your head, what do you do? What do you do?
Welcome back to G CINEPLEX, your destination for iconic action films. edge-of-your-seat thrills, and deep cinematic breakdowns. In today's video, we're hitting the accelerator on one of the most adrenaline-fueled action classics of the 1990s as we dive into Speed, 1994, directed by James Bond. This non-stop thriller follows a simple yet brilliant high-concept premise that never lets up: a city bus rigged to explode if it drops below 50 miles per hour, anchored by breakout performances from Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. Speed blends relentless pacing, sharp tension, and practical stunts to create a masterclass in suspense-driven action filmmaking. Beyond the explosions and chase sequences, the film thrives on character chemistry, real-time urgency, and the constant pressure of making life-or-death decisions in the blink of an eye. In this video, we'll break down the film's story, iconic moments, villain dynamics, action design, and why Speed remains a benchmark for modern action cinema decades after its release. So buckle up, hold on tight, and get ready for a ride that never slows down, only here on G CINEPLEX. Negation. Speed is a 1994 American action thriller that marked the featured directorial debut of James Bond and was written by Graham Yost, starring Keanu Reeves, Dennis Hopper, and Sandra Bullock, with Joe Morton and Jeff Daniels in supporting roles. The film follows LAPD SWAT officer Jack Traven, Reeves, who becomes locked in a deadly battle of wits with Howard Payne, Hopper, a disgruntled former bomb squad expert turned extortionist seeking revenge against the police department. After an opening set piece involving a booby-trapped elevator, Payne escalates his plan by rigging a Los Angeles city bus with an explosive device that will detonate if the vehicle's speed drops below 50 miles per hour. As the bus hurtles through city streets and onto unfinished freeways, Jack must find a way to keep the passengers alive while outsmarting Payne, who monitors the situation remotely. Amid the chaos, a civilian passenger, Annie Porter, Bullock, is forced to take the wheel when the bus driver is incapacitated, becoming an unexpected but crucial partner in Jack's efforts to maintain speed, manage the panicking passengers, and devise a daring solution before disaster strikes. The film's high-concept premise was inspired by Runaway Train, 1985, and the Japanese action thriller The Bullet Train, 1975. The idea originated when Graham Yost's father, Elwa Yost, mistakenly recalled Runaway Train as involving a bomb, leading Graham to reimagine the concept with a bus and a speed-based trigger, later raised from 20 to 50 miles per hour to heighten tension. Speed premiered on June 7, 1994, and was released theatrically by 20th Century Fox on June 10, quickly becoming a sleeper hit due to its relentless pacing, inventive action sequences, and strong performances. The film earned widespread critical praise and grossed approximately $350 million worldwide against a modest $37 million budget, making it the fifth highest-grossing film of 1994. Its technical achievements were recognized at major award ceremonies, winning the Academy Award for Best Sound at the 67th Oscars and earning Best Sound and Best Editing honors at the 48th British Academy Film Awards. A sequel, Speed 2, Cruise Control, was released in 1997, but it failed to replicate the original's success, drawing heavy criticism for its slower pace, changed setting, and the absence of Keanu Reeves. The film opens with LAPD SWAT bomb disposal officers Jack Traven and Harry Temple responding to a tense emergency involving a city elevator rigged with explosives and carrying 13 trapped passengers. The bombing is orchestrated by Howard Payne, a calculating extortionist who taunts the police while demanding money in exchange for the hostages' lives. Through quick thinking and precise teamwork, Jack and Harry manage to rescue the passengers moments before the elevator explodes. Their pursuit of Payne continues, but during the confrontation Harry is deliberately shot by Jack to prevent Payne from using him as a hostage. Cornered, Payne appears to die when his own explosives detonate, and Jack and Harry are publicly honored for their bravery at a medal ceremony. Unbeknownst to them, Payne has survived and secretly harbors a deep personal grudge against Jack, whom he blames for ruining his life. Payne soon resurfaces by detonating an empty bus as a diversion and then contacts Jack directly with a far more elaborate plan. He reveals that another city Busa, a 1964 GMC Nulka, has been fitted with a bomb that will arm itself once the vehicle reaches 50 miles per hour and will explode if the speed drops below that threshold, with an additional timer set to detonate before noon. Payne also warns that any attempt to remove passengers will trigger the bomb. He demands a ransom of $3.7 million, placing Jack in a race against time. Fighting through heavy traffic with the help of a civilian named Morris, Jack reaches the bus just after it has exceeded 50 miles per hour, activating the bomb. Amid the chaos, a panicked passenger accidentally shoots the bus driver, forcing another passenger, Annie Porter, to take control of the wheel. With the truth revealed to the terrified passengers, Jack boards the bus and works desperately to keep it moving while coordinating with Harry for backup. As a gesture of false goodwill, Payne allows the injured driver to be removed, but when a frightened passenger named Helen attempts to escape on her own, Payne detonates a smaller explosive, causing her death and reinforcing the seriousness of his threats. As Payne monitors the situation through hidden cameras, Jack and Annie navigate the bus through increasingly dangerous situations, including unfinished freeway sections and tight city traffic, eventually steering it toward Los Angeles International Airport to minimize civilian risk. During the investigation, Harry uncovers Payne's past as a former Atlanta bomb squad officer who was placed on administrative leave after losing his thumb in the line of duty. Payne's bombs reflect his lingering resentment toward the authorities, whom he believes dismissed his sacrifice with little more than a cheap gold watch. Harry leads a SWAT team to Payne's home, but it is revealed to be a trap, rigged with explosives that kill Harry and the officers, devastating Jack and leaving him to face Payne alone. In a final attempt to disarm the bomb, Jack crawls beneath the speeding bus on a tethered dolly, but the cable snaps and he is nearly lost before the passengers pull him back inside. During the struggle, the fuel tank is damaged and gasoline begins leaking, creating an even greater danger. Jack eventually realizes that Payne is relying on live surveillance footage from the bus. By looping the video feed, Jack tricks Payne into believing the bus is still full of passengers, buying enough time for everyone to escape. The unmanned bus then crashes and explodes, seemingly ending the threat. However, when Payne notices the repeated footage and sees police preparing to arrest him after collecting the ransom, he shifts his focus to revenge. While Jack prepares to take Annie home under police protection, Payne disguises himself as a police officer and kidnaps her. Jack discovers that Payne escaped through a hidden access point beneath a trash can and followed him into the subway system. There, Jack finds Annie forced to wear an explosive vest and confronts Payne, who flees onto a moving train with her. Payne shoots the train operator and disables the controls, then opens the ransom bag only to be sprayed with dye from a hidden pack, sending him into a rage. Jack pursues him onto the roof of the speeding train, where the two engage in a final struggle. Jack ultimately defeats Payne, ending his reign of terror. With no way to stop the runaway train, Jack accelerates it instead, causing it to derail and crash onto Hollywood Boulevard, where it finally grinds to a halt in front of stunned onlookers. Jack safely removes Annie's explosive vest, and the two emerge unharmed from the wreckage, sharing a moment together as the crowd looks on in disbelief. The cast of Speed is led by Keanu Reeves in the role of LAPD officer Jack Traven, a determined and quick-thinking SWAT bomb disposal specialist who becomes the central figure in the race to stop a series of deadly bomb threats. Dennis Hopper delivers a memorable performance as Howard Payne, the intelligent yet deeply embittered extortionist whose personal vendetta against the police fuels the film's escalating crisis. Sandra Bullock stars as Annie Porter, an ordinary civilian who is thrust into extraordinary circumstances when she is forced to drive the rigged bus, becoming an essential partner to Jack in keeping the passengers alive. Joe Morton appears as LAPD Lieutenant Herb McMahon, Jack's commanding officer who oversees the police response and coordinates efforts from headquarters, while Jeff Daniels plays Detective Harry Temple, Jack's close friend and partner whose investigation into Payne's past proves crucial to the story. The supporting cast adds depth and realism to the unfolding chaos, with Alan Ruck portraying Doug Stevens, a businessman whose initial arrogance gives way to cooperation under pressure, and Glenn Plummer as Morris, the helpful Jaguar owner who assists Jack early in the crisis. Beth Grant plays Helen, a frightened passenger whose panic leads to tragic consequences, while Hawthorne James appears as Sam Silver, one of the more level-headed bus passengers. Carlos Carrasco portrays Ortiz, a SWAT team member involved in the tactical response, and David Kriegel plays Terry, another passenger caught in the deadly situation. Natsuko Ohama appears as Mrs. Camino, whose presence adds emotional weight to the group of civilians trapped on the bus, while Daniel Villarreal plays Ray, one of the younger passengers. Margaret Medina is seen as Officer Robin, contributing to the police procedural side of the film. Additional roles are filled by Jordan Lund as Bagwell, Robert Mailhouse as the young executive passenger, and Patrick Fischler as Bob, the executive's friend, both representing the diverse personalities forced to work together to survive. Patrick John Hurley plays the CEO, with Susan Barnes appearing as a female executive. Further rounding out the bus's passenger list, Naisha Folkslimel portrays Mrs. McMahon, offering a brief glimpse into the personal life of Lieutenant McMahon, while Richard Lineback plays Sergeant Norwood and Beau Starr appears as the police commissioner overseeing the crisis. Richard Schiff takes on the role of Hugh, the subway train driver, and John Capot's portrays Bob, the ill-fated bus driver whose injury sets the main events in motion. Thomas Rosales Jr. appears as Vinny, one of Payne's associates, and Sandy Martin rounds out the cast as a bartender, contributing to the film's richly populated world. The production of Speed was shaped by a combination of creative inspiration, studio skepticism, and significant last-minute refinements that ultimately defined the film's high-energy style. Screenwriter Graham Yost conceived the idea after hearing his father, Canadian television host Helwa Yost, describe the 1985 film Runaway Train, mistakenly recalling that the runaway train's danger stemmed from a bomb rather than mechanical failure. This misunderstanding sparked Graham Yost's belief that a bomb-driven concept would work even better on a city bus, where constant motion through urban streets could sustain tension. His earliest version featured a bomb that would detonate if the bus slowed below 20 miles per hour, but after discussing the idea with a friend, Yost raised the threshold to 50 miles per hour to increase urgency and dramatic stakes. The script was initially titled Minimum Speed, but Yost later changed it to Speed to avoid negative or confusing connotations. The climactic tone of the story was partly inspired by the 1976 action comedy Silver Streak, which influenced the idea of ending the film with a runaway train sequence. Yost's first draft was far more contained than the finished film, with the entire story taking place on the bus and no elevator or subway sequences included. In that version, the bus was meant to circle Dodger Stadium and ultimately crash into the Hollywood sign. After completing the script, Yost pitched it to Paramount Pictures, which showed early interest and suggested Die Hard director John McTiernan for the project. McTiernan declined, feeling the concept was too similar to Die Hard, but he recommended Jan de Bont, who had worked as director of photography on major action films such as Die Hard and The Hunt for Red October. Although Michael Bay also expressed interest in directing, de Bont ultimately came on board. Paramount later backed away from the project, doubting that audiences would remain engaged with a film set largely on a bus. Yost and de Bont then took the project to 20th Century Fox, which agreed to finance the film on the condition that additional action sequences be added to broaden its scope. De Bont proposed opening the film with a bomb threat involving an elevator, inspired by his own experience being trapped in an elevator while working on Die Hard, using the sequence to establish Jack Traven's intelligence and resourcefulness. He also suggested ending the film with a subway chase to provide a final escalation, ideas that Fox approved. Portions of the film were shot on real Los Angeles roadways, including scenes of the bus entering Interstate 110 through active traffic, adding realism and intensity to the action. Just 1 week before filming began, Joss Whedon was hired to revise the script and sharpen the dialogue. Whedon made substantial contributions, reshaping Jack Traven from a cocky action hero into a more grounded, polite, and earnest police officer, and removing what he felt were forced or overly macho one-liners. He also wrote the film's most iconic line, "Pop quiz, hotshot," which became synonymous with the movie. Whedon reworked several supporting characters as well, most notably transforming Doug Stevens from an unpleasant lawyer into a more comedic and sympathetic tourist figure. Additionally, early versions of the script had positioned Jack's partner, Harry Temple, as the true villain, but once Dennis Hopper was cast as Howard Payne, this idea was dropped and Temple was rewritten as a loyal ally. Casting decisions also evolved significantly during production. While the project was still at Paramount, Jeff Speakman was attached to star as Jack Traven, but he was dropped after the film moved to 20th Century Fox. Stephen Baldwin was offered the role but declined, feeling it too closely resembled Die Hard's John McClane, a concern echoed by Richard Grieco, who also turned it down and later expressed regret. Other actors considered included Tom Cruise, Tom Hanks, Wesley Snipes, and Woody Harrelson. Jan de Bont ultimately cast Keanu Reeves after being impressed by his performance in Point Break, believing Reeves conveyed the right mix of physical capability, vulnerability, and sincerity. Reeves underwent extensive physical training and cut his hair short for the role, a decision that initially worried studio executives. Notably, Reeves had previously worked with Dennis Hopper in River's Edge, adding an extra layer of familiarity between the two leads. The character of Annie Porter underwent major changes before Sandra Bullock was cast. Originally written as an African-American paramedic to justify her driving skills, the role was first offered to Halle Berry, who declined and later said she regretted the decision. As the character shifted toward comic relief, Ellen DeGeneres was briefly considered. Eventually, the role was rewritten as a romantic lead opposite Jack Traven, leading to Sandra Bullock's casting. Bullock auditioned alongside Reeves to test their on-screen chemistry, including physically demanding scenes, which convinced the filmmakers of their compatibility. Other actresses, including Meryl Streep, Kim Basinger, and Anne Heche, were either considered or offered the role but declined, making Bullock's breakout performance one of the film's most defining and enduring elements. Principal photography for Speed began on September 7, 1993, and continued through December 23, 1993, with filming taking place primarily in and around Los Angeles. Director Jan de Bont approached the production with a strong emphasis on practical effects and large-scale physical stunts to heighten realism. For the film's opening elevator sequence, the production constructed an 80-foot model of a 50-story elevator shaft, allowing de Bont to stage the suspenseful rescue with controlled yet visually convincing depth and motion. During the shoot, the production was affected by the sudden death of actor River Phoenix, a close friend of Keanu Reeves. The loss had a profound emotional impact on Reeves, and de Bont adjusted the filming schedule to accommodate him by assigning less physically demanding scenes during that period. De Bont later recalled that Reeves became noticeably quieter and more withdrawn, but he also believed this vulnerability enhanced his performance. As Reeves initially doubted his suitability as an action hero, a hesitation de Bont felt mirrored Jack Traven's reluctant thrust into extraordinary circumstances. As filming progressed, Reeves grew more confident and increasingly involved in the action, even secretly rehearsing the dangerous Jaguar to bus jump and ultimately performing it himself against de Bont's wishes. The production relied heavily on practical vehicles, using a total of 11 GM New Look buses, TDH 5303, and 3 Grumman 870 buses to portray the doomed city bus. These vehicles were modified for different purposes, including high-speed exterior shots, interior dialogue scenes, and specialized under-the-bus sequences. 2 of the buses were destroyed during explosive scenes, while others were adapted with reinforced frames or stripped interiors to accommodate cameras and stunt equipment. The dramatic bus jump was filmed in a single take using a specially rigged bus fitted with a concealed ramp to provide lift, with the stunt driver secured in a shock-absorbing harness to minimize injury upon landing. The bus route shown in the film, labeled 33 Downtown, was fictional but modeled after Santa Monica's real-world Big Blue bus service. One of the surviving buses later became a collectible piece of film history and was auctioned for $102,000 in 2018. Many of the freeway sequences were filmed on California's Interstate 105 and Interstate 110, particularly at the Judge Harry Pregerson interchange. which was still under construction during production. De Bont noticed the unfinished roadway during a location scout and decided to incorporate it into the story, leading to the iconic scene in which the bus appears to leap across a missing section of freeway. While the bus was launched using a ramp to achieve the necessary airtime, computer-generated imagery was later added by Sony Pictures Imageworks to create the illusion of a large gap in the road. The complexity of the stunt was underscored years later when a 2009 episode of Mythbusters tested the scenario and concluded that such a jump would be impossible under real-world conditions. De Bont later revealed in the DVD commentary that the stunt did not succeed on its first attempt, as the driver missed the ramp and severely damaged the bus. A replacement vehicle was prepared, and the successful jump was filmed 2 days later, though it overshot the intended landing zone and destroyed one of the cameras. Fortunately, a second camera positioned 90 feet from the ramp captured the shot that appears in the final film. The movie's concluding action scenes were filmed at Mojave Airport, which doubled for Los Angeles International Airport, allowing the production to stage large-scale explosions and runway action without disrupting actual airport operations. For the climactic subway sequence, shots of the Los Angeles Metro Red Line were largely created using an 8th scale model, with the exception of the train derailment jump, which required more complex staging. The MD-520N helicopter seen throughout the film, registered as N599DB, continued to have a notable life after production, later being sold to the Calgary Police Service in 1995. Where it remained in active use until 2006 before eventually being transferred to a private owner. The music of Speed played a crucial role in defining the film's relentless momentum and high adrenaline atmosphere, combining a commercially driven soundtrack with a powerful original score. A soundtrack album featuring songs from and inspired by the film was released on June 28, 1994. Capitalizing on the movie's popularity and complementing its fast-paced tone with contemporary rock and pop tracks, the album achieved notable commercial success internationally, particularly in Japan, where it remained popular for years and was eventually certified gold by the Recording Industry Association of Japan, RIAG, in 2002, underscoring the film's lasting global appeal. For the film's original score, composer Michael Kamen was initially considered, but director Jan de Bont ultimately selected Mark Mancina, who at the time was emerging as a distinctive voice in action film music. Mancina had previously worked closely with Hans Zimmer, contributing to scores for films such as Days of Thunder, Where Sleeping Dogs Lie, and True Romance, and brought that experience to Speed. His score emphasized pulsating rhythms, driving percussion, and bold brass themes designed to mirror the constant forward motion of the narrative, reinforcing the sense of urgency and danger faced by the characters. Mancina's music became one of the film's defining elements, heightening tension during action sequences while still allowing for quieter, character-focused moments. In addition to the song-based soundtrack, a separate album dedicated solely to Mancina's score was released on August 30, 1994. By 20th Century Fox Film Scores. This release featured approximately 40 minutes of music from the film and allowed audiences to experience the score independently from the movie. Years later, the score received renewed attention when La La Land Records, in collaboration with Fox Music, released a limited expanded and newly remastered edition on February 28, 2012. This comprehensive release presented 69 minutes and 25 seconds of music across 32 tracks arranged in chronological order, offering a more complete representation of Mancina's work. The expanded edition also included the song Speed by Billy Idol, making it a definitive musical collection for fans and collectors alike. Speed was released theatrically on June 10, 1994, in 2,138 theaters across the United States and Canada, where it immediately proved to be a major commercial success. The film debuted at number 1 at the U.S. box office, outperforming established competitors such as The Flintstones and City Slickers 2, The Legend of Curly's Gold, and earned an impressive $14.5 million during its opening weekend. It maintained the top position for 1 week before being overtaken by Wolf, yet still posted a strong $12.9 million in its second weekend. In its third weekend, Even with the highly anticipated debut of The Lion King, Speed held on to second place and added another $12.4 million to its domestic total. The film demonstrated exceptional staying power internationally, remaining at number 1 for 8 consecutive weeks in Australia and an extraordinary 10 weeks in Japan. It also set opening weekend records for 20th Century Fox in several territories, including South Korea, Brazil, and South Africa, highlighting its broad global appeal. By the end of its theatrical run, Speed had grossed $121.3 million in the United States and Canada and an additional $229.2 million overseas, resulting in a worldwide total of approximately $350.5 million. This figure far exceeded its relatively modest production budget of $37 million, firmly establishing the film as one of the biggest hits of 1994. The film also became Sandra Bullock's highest-grossing project for nearly 2 decades, until it was surpassed by Gravity in 2013. Critical reception to Speed was overwhelmingly positive, with critics praising its relentless pacing, inventive premise, and energetic performances. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds a 95% approval rating based on 79 reviews, with an average score of 8.10 out of 10, and the site's consensus describing it as a terrific popcorn thriller that is taut, tense, and energetic, bolstered by standout performances from Keanu Reeves, Dennis Hopper, and Sandra Bullock. Metacritic assigned the film a weighted average score of 78 out of 100 based on 17 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews, while audiences surveyed by CinemaScore awarded the film an A grade, reflecting strong word-of-mouth and viewer satisfaction. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave the film a full 4 out of 4 stars, calling it an exercise in manic exhilaration and applauding Reeves's successful evolution into a convincing action hero, as well as Hopper's intense and memorable villainous turn. Ebert's television partner Gene Siskel echoed this enthusiasm, describing Reeves as absolutely compelling and asserting that every major sequence worked, with both critics agreeing that the film was pure entertainment. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone remarked that Speed works like a charm, while Janet Maslin of the New York Times highlighted Dennis Hopper's portrayal of unhinged menace and noted that the film's rapid pace sacrificed deeper character development in favor of sustained momentum. Owen Gleiberman of Entertainment Weekly awarded the film an A, praising Jan de Bont's confident direction, and Richard Sickle of Time emphasized the film's ability to tap into everyday anxieties, labeling it a highly effective thriller. Over time, Speed has continued to gain recognition as a modern action classic. Quentin Tarantino named it among the top 20 films he had seen between 1992 and 2009, while Entertainment Weekly ranked it 8th on its list of the best Sochem movies of the past 25 years. Empire magazine included the film in its 2008 list of the 500 greatest movies of all time, placing it at number 451, and in 2017, critic Mark Kermode of the BBC revisited the film and described it as a timeless masterpiece, praising its enduring appeal and craftsmanship. In 2025, The Hollywood Reporter further cemented the film's legacy by naming Speed as featuring the best stunts of 1994. The film also enjoyed long-term success on home media, beginning with its initial release on VHS and Laserdisc by Fox Video on November 15, 1994. Strong rental and sales performance significantly boosted its overall domestic revenue, although the original VHS was limited to a standard 4:3 television format. A widescreen VHS edition followed on August 20, 1996, released alongside titles such as True Lies, The Abyss, and The Last of the Mohicans, allowing viewers to experience the film closer to its theatrical presentation. Speed made its DVD debut on November 3, 1998, featuring the widescreen version of the film but minimal bonus content. A more comprehensive 2-disc collector's edition DVD was released on July 30, 2002, as part of Fox Home Entertainment's 5-star collection, offering THX certification, 2 audio commentaries, a DTS 5.1 soundtrack, deleted scenes, featurettes, galleries, trailers, and a music video. This edition was later reissued in 2006 under Fox's Award Series label. The film arrived on Blu-ray disc on November 14, 2006, as part of the format's early wave of releases, carrying over most of the special features along with an interactive trivia track and game. Most recently, Speed was released on Ultra HD Blu-ray on May 4, 2021, by 20th Century Studios and Walt Disney Studios Home Entertainment, preserving the film's legacy with improved picture quality while retaining the majority of the special features from the acclaimed 2002 Collector's Edition. On June 10, 1994, 20th Century Fox revved up Actioner Speed in theaters, where it would go on to be a summer hit grossing $120 million plus stateside. The Hollywood Reporter's original review is below. There should be traffic jams at the box office as Fox picks up many busloads of writers for its fast and furiously entertaining thriller Speed, opening wide and getting the jump on other seasonal action fare. Speed is a good bet to race through most of the summer and post one of the year's highest total grosses, recalling the fortuitous combination of a good, relatively offbeat cast and a mostly believable scenario that made Fox's Die Hard a blockbuster. Speed offers Keanu Reeves, Sandra Bullock and a Santa Monica commuter bus in a perilous game with a money-hungry bomber played by Dennis Hopper, eschewing most of the cliched character development and subplots that dragged out the typical Irwin Allen disaster flick. First-time screenwriter Graham Yost employs smart dialogue and well-timed tests of metal to make his heroes, innocence and villain come vibrantly to life, opening with a crowd-cheering elevator rescue that introduces LAPD SWAT partners Jack, Reeves, and Harry, Jeff Daniels, as well as the pyrotechnically masterful but cracked Howard, Hopper. The film quickly accelerates into the main attraction. Foiled by Jack at the outset, Howard plants a bomb on a bus with a dozen or so passengers, with the device set to explode if the bus goes slower than 50 miles per hour. For good measure, he taunts our hero, demands several $1 million and places all kinds of harsh conditions on any plans for rescuing the passengers and averting disaster. With the help of a courageous woman passenger, Bullock, who takes over driving the bus, the exciting race to stay alive while handling a series of obstacles and complications provides plenty of close calls and death-defying feats. Moving to the completed and uncompleted sections of the LA subway for its get-the-villain climax, the scenario inevitably stretches believability too much. It plays well enough, but a trim here and there could have improved the final section. Reeves, shorn of the dudesical look and attitude of his youth comedies and the stiffness of his period roles, is well cast as an everyday hero with a menacing intensity who's an admirably quick thinker on his feet. Bullock, whose character is allowed to realistically react to the danger and carnage, should win many more fans with her assured, confident performance. As the brainy villain, Hopper is effectively conservative in his approach. Director Janabont, the cinematographer of Die Hard and The Hunt for Red October, making his feature debut, expertly builds tension and uncorks magnificent scenes of vehicular mayhem. Honors are due the pedal to the metal production team for the film's terrific widescreen imagery, great editing and excellent sound work. A. David Hunter, originally published June 6, 1994, Speed is like an ingenious wind-up machine. It's a smart, inventive thriller that starts with hostages trapped on an elevator and continues with two chases, one on a bus, one on a subway, so that it's wall-to-wall with action, stunts, special effects and excitement. We've seen this done before, but seldom so well, or at such a high pitch of energy. The movie stars Keanu Reeves as a member of the Los Angeles bomb squad. He and his veteran partner, Jeff Daniels, are called in after a mad bomber severs the cables holding an elevator in a high-rise building. Now the terrified passengers are trapped between floors, and the bomber wants $3 million or he'll push a button and blow off the car's emergency brakes. This situation in itself might make the heart of a thriller, but it's only a curtain raiser for Speed, which turns into a battle of the wills between Reeves and the madman. The bomber is played by Dennis Hopper, the most dependable and certainly the creepiest villain in the movies right now. He's a former cop with a grudge, an intelligent man with a big bag of tricks who seems able to anticipate every one of Reeves' moves. He wants not only the ransom money but also the satisfaction of humiliating the LAPD, and when he's outsmarted on the elevator caper, his next trick is truly diabolical. He rigs an ordinary Los Angeles rapid transit bus so that if it exceeds 50 miles per hour, a bomb will be armed, and then, if its speed falls below 50 miles per hour, the bomb will explode. This is an inspiration that will raise many questions for anyone who has ever been in LA traffic, but never mind, it provides the basis for an extended, suspenseful chase sequence that comes up with one ingenious crisis after another. Reeves manages to get himself on board the bus, of course, and after the driver is shot by a passenger, another passenger, Sandra Bullock, grabs the wheel while Reeves tries to think a way out of the dilemma, and the bus cruises at 55 miles per hour in the wrong lanes, in the wrong directions, sideswiping other cars, causing accidents, and eventually ending up on an empty freeway that would provide clear sailing if it weren't for a 50-foot gap in an overpass. Can a bus really leap a 50-foot space? This is the kind of movie where you don't ask questions like that. The screenplay, by Graham Yost, piles on complications until the movie's very construction is a delight. Bullock keeps her cool at the wheel while Reeves tries stunts like going under the bus to try to disarm the bomb while it continues to bounce along at high speed. Meanwhile, the story intercuts between Hopper, who is issuing ultimatums and dropping sinister hints, and Daniels, back at headquarters, who is using computers to try to figure out the blackmailer's identity. When the bus episode finally ends, we sit back, drained, ready for the movie to end, too. But it has another surprise in store, a chase on a subway train, with Bullock held hostage and handcuffed inside one of the cars. All of this is of course gloriously silly, a plundering of situations from the Indiana Jones and Die Hard movies all the way back to The Perils of Pauline. But so what? If it works, it works. Keanu Reeves has never had a role like this before. In fact, in his previous film, he played the mystical Prince Siddhartha, and generally he tends toward dreamy, sensitive characters. That's why it's sort of amazing to see him so cool and focused here, a completely convincing action hero who is as centered and resourceful as a Clint Eastwood or Harrison Ford in similar situations. He and Bullock have good chemistry. They appreciate the humor that is always flickering just beneath the surface of the preposterous plot. And Hopper's dialogue has been twisted into savagely ironic understatements that provide their own form of comic relief. Films like Speed belong to the genre I call bruised forearm movies, because you're always grabbing the arm of the person sitting next to you. Done wrong, they seem like tired replays of old chase cliches. Done well, they're fun. Done as well as Speed, they generate a kind of manic exhilaration. The director, Jandabont, has worked as a cinematographer on many action classics, including Total Recall and Die Hard. Here he shows his own mastery, in A Great Entertainment. 3 Speed, 1994. Director, Jandabont. Screenwriter, Graham Yost. Starring, Keanu Reeves, Dennis Hopper, Sandra Bullock, Joe Morton and Jeff Daniels. When Speed opened in the summer of 1994 at the #1 spot at the box office, beating out the highly anticipated sequel to City Slickers, The Legend of Curly's Gold. The action thriller's surprise success marked a turning point in the careers of its filmmakers and stars. It was the directorial debut of Jandabont, then known for his cinematography work on Lethal Weapon, Basic Instinct and Die Hard, and served as the catapult that launched both Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves into superstardom. The film earned critical acclaim too, and eventually went on to win 2 Academy Awards for Best Sound Effects Editing and Best Sound. 30 years later, Speed is regarded as one of the greatest action films ever made. After LAPD officer Jack Traven, Keanu Reeves, and his partner Harry Temple, Jeff Daniels, thwart bomber Howard Payne's, Dennis Hopper, attempt to extort $3.7 million by holding an elevator full of people hostage, all seems right in the world. The good guys won and the bad guy blew himself up, but Payne is still alive, and he re-emerges with an even more insane plan to get the money he feels he's owed by using Jack's unwavering desire to save people against him. Pop quiz, hot shot. There's a bomb on a bus. Once the bus goes 50 miles an hour, the bomb is armed. If it drops below 50, It blows up. What do you do? What follows this iconic riddle is a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, as Jack and the passengers, including Annie, Sandra Bullock, who must navigate the bus through freeways and city streets without losing speed, try to outsmart pain and get everyone to safety before it all goes boom. Watching Speed is like being on a roller coaster, each twist and turn perfectly calibrated for maximum thrills. Even though the movie is essentially one action set piece after another for nearly 2 hours straight, none of it ever feels monotonous because of DeBond's keen sense of pacing, his camera constantly moving and energized, aided by Mark Mancini's anxious, adrenaline-pumping score. There is something tactile about the action in Speed, with its seamless blend of special and visual effects, making it nearly impossible to tell the difference between a real bus flying off a ramp and a miniature one. The film's use of matte paintings is also especially effective. Speed is truly a feat of action filmmaking. Towards the end of the film, Payne monologues to Jack that a bomb is made to explode. The film itself seems to agree with this as it is constantly hurtling towards bigger and better explosions and increasingly over-the-top life-or-death situations. Still, Speed never takes itself too seriously. Moments of suspense and danger are juxtaposed with equal doses of humor, like when Annie accidentally swerves and hits a baby carriage, only to discover that it's actually filled with cans, or when she sheepishly tells Jack that her license was recently suspended for, what else, speeding. These moments of levity cut through the tension, offering us a chance to catch our breath. Aside from these technical achievements, Speed wouldn't be half the movie it is without characters that feel grounded and real, that give us something to hold on to amidst the chaos and spectacle. Even characters who only show up for a few minutes, like the passengers trapped in the elevator or the owner of the Jaguar, Glenn Plummer, Jack commandeers, are memorable, making the world feel lived in and unique. The supporting cast is rounded out by an array of familiar faces from film and TV, like A Scandal's Joe Morton, who plays Lieutenant Mac McMahon, and A Succession's Alan Ruck, who plays the well-meaning but oblivious tourist Stevens, who probably didn't expect his first visit to LA to include getting on a bus rigged to explode. Jeff Daniels is a standout as Harry, a bomb expert whose cynical worldview exquisitely complements Jack's steadfast optimism. He's the most gut-wrenching performance in the film. At the center of it all is Keanu Reeves, who plays Jack with an intense yet quiet confidence from the moment he appears on screen, the camera whirling around him as he pulls on a bulletproof vest. The camera tracks him up the stairs of the office building where the workers are trapped in the elevator. He's casually chewing gum, silently assessing his surroundings. The way Reeves carries himself in this film, his subtle physicality, tells us exactly who Jack is without him having to say anything at all. He's clearly resourceful and great under pressure, but also exceedingly polite, respectfully calling Annie ma'am until he learns her name. Above all, we trust him. He's the guy that's going to get us out of this. Reeves is clearly at home in the action genre, and while there is now no doubt that he will go down in movie history as one of the genre's greatest stars, audiences saw him in a much different light in the early 90s. Before Speed, Reeves was known for either being a doofus, thanks to starring in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, or for taking on what Roger Ebert described as dreamy, sensitive roles like in River's Edge and My Own Private Idaho. Though his role as FBI agent Johnny Utah in the 1991 crime drama Point Break was certainly a stepping stone in his ascension to action star, it was Speed that truly solidified his status as a leading man in Hollywood, and where the genesis of Neo and John Wick can be found. With Reeves, audiences were given a taste of a different kind of hero, one that didn't fall in line with the kind of hyper-masculine, muscled-up stars that dominated the 80s, such as Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone. Sandra Bullock and Dennis Hopper provide the perfect bookends to Reeves's performance. As Annie, Bullock is relatable yet capable, and she and Reeves have instant chemistry. It's easy to see why Speed put her on the map. Dennis Hopper is one of the greatest talents to come out of the new Hollywood movement, with credits in Rebel Without a Cause, Apocalypse Now and Easy Rider, which he also directed, and his commitment to being as batshit crazy as possible in Speed is part of what makes the film's more insane elements work so well. He thrives off chaos, finds catharsis in explosions. He's the perfect foil to someone like Jack who, as Payne says, spends his entire life trying to stop the bomb from becoming what makes Payne such an intriguing and terrifying villain, though, is that he's almost right. Speed serves as a reminder of what makes a movie unforgettable. Its attention to character dynamics and development make it more than just spectacle. At the heart of Speed is a really good story, a quintessential 90s blockbuster that defined an era and helped to usher in a new kind of action hero. Score: 22-24 for Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock's electrifying bus set thriller acts as a reminder of just how good we used to have it at a time of overwhelming entertainment bloat. A budget, length, content, discussion. A ride back to the summer of 1994 and the brisk, brilliant economy of Speed feels like the satisfying small-screen vacation we all deserve right now. Dutch cinematographer turned director Jan de Bond's breath-stealing action movie hasn't gained any extra depth or allegorical meaning when rewatched 30 years later. It's mercifully think-piece-proof in its earnest straightforwardness, but it has benefited from a bleak comparison with where Hollywood is at this precarious moment. It's been a mostly bummer summer at the box office, with a panic over expensive big-bet films like The Fall Guy and Furiosa stumbling, while the majority who choose streaming instead having to settle for murky, poorly made dreck like Atlas, a much-watched yet much-loathed Netflix night ruiner. We have a movie star problem both in quantitative and qualitative terms. Too few A-listers under 50 still packing M in, and those who sometimes do, too often struggling to convince with their charisma credentials. See, Anyone But You. Action has gone from very bad to way worse, with a lazy over-reliance on the alienation of digital over the immersion of physical, and even bigger budgeted films are still lacking that crackle and texture of real film. Industry fear has also increased the number of reboots, remakes and legacy sequels, all sleepwalking on fumes from years prior, zombies roaming the cinemas where humans used to be, which makes something like Speed a tightly plotted, modestly budgeted and original action thriller led by two genuine movie star performances, one established, one emerging, and stuffed with action that feels urgent and involving, if not always plausible, feel like a bigger treat now than it even felt back then. The story was hinged on a neat idea: a madman who attaches a bomb to a Los Angeles bus that will go off if it drops below 50 miles per hour. But it arrived in those post-Die Hard years, after a decade of Stallone and Schwarzenegger dominance, when the genre was starting to enter its parody era, quite literally the year before with Arnie's Last Action Hero. Graham Yost's original one-location script was first matched with the Die Hard director John McTiernan and centered around another wisecracking lead who ate rulebooks for breakfast, but the comparisons became a curse, and instead, Speed started to transform into something different. It expanded outside of the bus with two big set pieces bookending, and Reeves was cast as Jack, an atypical choice in many ways. Better known for playing long-haired surfers or slackers, he marched straight to the gym to prepare for 2 months and shaved off almost all of his hair. 30-year-old Joss Whedon was also brought in, just a week before production started, to play with the script, excising glib one-liners and ultimately changing it to such an extent that even Yost admitted that he owned 98.9% of the dialogue in the finished movie. What Whedon managed to do was give the film a fun zip without adding a smug smile. Reeves was allowed to play as straight, as determined and hyper-competent, and there were real stakes and consequences, which meant that the action, as sense-defying as it often was, pulled us in that much closer. The cold open set in a bomb-strapped office elevator filled with hostages clued us in fast to how no-nonsense proceedings would be. Little time for anything but the job at hand. A film that lived up to its title without feeling rushed or half-thought. De Bond choreographed the action with clarity, a modest-sounding skill that would mark him among the true greats within contemporary action cinema. And Yost, Whedon set up character with action-reaction rather than clumsy exposition. We don't need to know inner lives, we just need to know how well these people will operate under extremities. Jack is a focused problem-solver, whose heroics are led more by brain than brawn. A refreshing departure after a decade of the opposite. The opening set up a simple yet involving dynamic with him and the bad guy, played by Dennis Hopper in delicious Batman villain mode, that has a tinge of the personal but is mostly professional, the goal being money. We head into the main set piece as if we're in a disaster movie, a group of carefully curated archetypes. Brash tourist, fragile older woman, impulsive young guy with a gun, trapped in one location and, together with Mark Mancina's all-timer action score, the tension is ratcheted up and then maintained until the bus is no more. We meet Sandra Bullock's Annie, who becomes an accidental stunt driver, and there's a restrained yet romantic buzz between her and Jack which, devoid of pause and breathe monologues about their past, works because of an easy chemistry that most rom-coms would kill for. Meryl Streep allegedly being offered the role makes for a fascinating thought experiment. Bullock, who broke out the year before in Demolition Man, has that loose, next-door charm that puts us immediately, firmly on her side, and it works brilliantly in life-or-death circumstances like these, as it did the following year in prescient cyber thriller The Net or years later in Gravity. When they finally kiss, when some air is briefly allowed into the film after they're off the bus, it makes sense in a way that it wouldn't have before. Much was made of the film's big, batty stunt at the bus clearing the 50-feet gap in the road, a credulity-obliterating jaw-dropper that has since been debunked on Mythbusters. But we didn't really need it to be taken from film set to physics class. It's not as if we saw it as hard fact at the time, and it's not as if we cared either. The film up until that point mostly existing within a heightened yet believable version of reality that didn't allow for cheap writer cheats to propel the action. It was, and is, an exhilarating moment, fittingly for a film set in 3 different modes of transport. Speed is an engine that never runs out of gas, a lofty achievement at almost 2 hours. It's as exciting now as it was then, although, as is often the case with many out-of-nowhere hits, Hollywood never quite figured out the lesson. There were other bomb-based thrillers in the years after A Sudden Death with Jean-Claude Van Damme, Chill Factor with Cuba Gooding Jr., Chain Reaction with Reeves himself, but none exploded in quite the same way. De Bond finally made an actual disaster movie with hit Twister, but struggled elsewhere with anonymous studio hackwork like The Haunting and Tomb Raider 2. But his biggest mistake, along with Studio Fox and Bullock too, was thinking that Speed itself could and should be franchised. While we like to think of this as a more modern problem, Hollywood has long attempted rubbishy and redundant follow-ups to films that didn't need them. Look what's happened to Rosemary's Baby, Revenge of the Stepford Wives, Staying Alive, The Sting 2, and Speed 2. Cruise Control remains one of the all-time worst shoulda-quit-while-ahead sequels. Reeves wisely steered clear, although he did get a chance to showcase his connection with Bullock once again in 2006's rather wonderful, and rather slept-on, Romance the Lake House. The genuine embarrassment that Speed 2 left us all with has at least helped to prevent a more recent attempt to resurrect or relaunch the original. There's no whisper of a too cheap limited series or too expensive legacy sequel bringing back Reeves and Bullock and having Barry Keoghan play the bitter bastard son of Hopper's bomber, eager for revenge. We don't need more Speed, but we do need more like Speed, more strategically budgeted and cannily crafted summer movies for adults, taken seriously but not overly so, delivered with a smile rather than a smirk, and made with a full tank of gas. 5 Principal cast: Keanu Reeves, Sandra Bullock, Dennis Hopper, Jeff Daniels, Joe Morton, Alan Ruck, Glenn Plummer, Beth Grant, Hawthorne James, David Kriegel, Natsuko Ohama, Daniel Villarreal, Margaret Medina, Jordan Lund, Robert Mailhouse, Bo Starr, Richard Schiff, Richard Lineback, Carlos Carrasco. Synopsis: when the LA Police Department learns that there's a bomb on a city bus, designed to arm when the bus goes over 50 miles per hour, adrenaline junkie cop Jack Traven boards said bus and so begins a desperate race against time to disarm the device before the bus comes to a stop and explodes. The simple things in life are often the best. Speed, a mid-90s action thriller that came along with virtually no expectation and blew everyone away, still remains one of the best action films of the last 30 years by a wide margin. The reason for this is threefold. First, the premise of the film, a premise so simple and uncluttered with extravagance it felt and still feels like a breath of fresh air over more complex thrillers. Second, the chemistry between the two main leads, Reeves and Bullock, is terrific. There's a bond between them that no director could possibly fake. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the direction from Jandabont is rock solid, focused solely on the story and the bristling narrative. Unlike follow-up efforts like The Haunting and Tomb Raider, The Cradle of Life, Speed is like a wet slap in the face on a cold day. It opens up the sinuses and gets the blood pumping with a skill most blockbusters in the new millennium struggle to accomplish. Revisiting the film recently, I was just amazed at how crisp it is, just how simple things are in terms of story and character. Speed isn't simplistic, no sir, but the lack of frivolousness or look-at-me extravagance is a blessing to these jaded, cynical critics' eyes. SWAT team members Jack Traven, Keanu Reeves, and Harry Temple, Jeff Daniels, are among the task force called to a high-rise bomb threat in downtown Los Angeles. After rescuing a group of people from an elevator designed as a decoy, Jack and Harry face off against the unnamed bomber, Dennis Hopper, before he detonates an explosive device and escapes. Several months later, after recovering from their injuries and receiving medals of commendation from the city, the bomber returns to taunt Jack. Jack learns that the bomber has planted a device on a city bus, designed to arm once the bus reached 50 miles per hour, 110 kilometers per hour for our metric readers. The second part of the plot is that if the bus then drops below 50 miles per hour, the bomb will detonate. Racing across the city, Jack boards the bus by jumping from a moving vehicle, before assuming control of the situation. When the driver of the bus is shot, another passenger, Annie, Sandra Bullock, takes the driver's seat and together, she and Jack navigate through the streets of LA to a place where their speed will not be an issue. Meanwhile, Harry and the rest of the LA police force track down the location of the bomber, who has bigger plans for the city than just terrorizing the transport system. The trailer made Speed the kind of film no one could pass up. There's a bomb on a bus. Once the bus goes 50, the bomb is armed. If it drops below 50, it goes off. What do you do? The hook is so simple, and the result is bottled lightning. Jandabont, a renowned cinematographer who'd worked on films such as Die Hard, The Hunt for Red October and Lethal Weapon 3, among others, certainly had enough experience with action films to transition from DOP to director. His pedigree was exemplary, and the expectation was high, with influences from films like Runaway Train and Silver Streak. Graham Yost's screenplay, Internet Info has it that Joss Whedon also massaged the script, but remained uncredited, is a muscular, accessible and high-octane roller coaster of action beats and 90s humor, souped up on the most unlikely of settings, an inner-city bus. Yost pared back complexity in order to keep the story brisk and free of convoluted extravagance. There's no Hans Gruber terrorist plot here, although Dennis Hopper's arch-mad bomber character certainly has sprinklings of justifiable motivation to prod audience empathy. Jack Traven is a stock character cop. He's cliched to the point of near incredulity. The man either has a death wish or is an adrenaline junkie of the first order. He's superhuman and indestructible, just the way we like our 90s heroes. Martin Riggs and John McClane would have been proud of this film, that's for sure. Speed manages to do something not too many movies accomplish, with great skill. It's an ensemble piece that feels like there's only two people in it. Keanu Reeves, who had something of a career high during the mid to late 90s, sweats and clenches his way through this film with the knowledge that he's in on the joke. Sure, he's no great actor, but this role, along with The Matrix's Neo, seems custom-built for his particular talents. Sandra Bullock, miles away from her Oscar performances and Drek like All About Steve, is cute as a button, sweet as Annie, with the innocent insouciance of a pre-millennium girl who just happens to know how to drive a bus. Don't they all? The screen chemistry between Bullock and Reeves is terrific, and they play off each other well. It's a shame they ruined that chemistry by making The Lake House about a decade later. Dennis Hopper, as the Mad Bomber, is certainly mad as hell, and his motivations in the end add up to make him a credible character and screen villain. Hopper's wild-eyed portrayal in this, which seems a lot like many of his other wide-eyed crazy characters during his career, captured the zeitgeist of the moment and became the poster boy for fallible human villains. He breezes through this film completely upstaging Reeves, which is not really that hard considering Hopper is actually capable of fat broken barn emotion. Jeff Daniels is solid as Jack's partner, Harry, and he has some of the film's better lines. The commuters trapped on that bus, including Alan Ruck in a supporting role, are all equally benign characters, although the sense of camaraderie they have with Jack as the plot unfolds becomes quite palpable. Look out for a scene chewing Joe Morton, better known to audiences as the guy who invented Skynet in Terminator 2, as Jack's boss, who berates everyone around him with the subtlety of explosive diarrhea. Jan de Bont's direction is key to this film's success, for without him, it would all fall in a heap. De Bont recognizes that by keeping the film moving at a brisk pace, offering tidbits of character development throughout and ensuring that the viewer never really knows where the next surprise is coming from, the whole enterprise will be more entertaining than not. The film opens with a terrific 20-minute set piece inside a skyscraper, with Jack and Harry involved in a harrowing elevator rescue, before their requisite breath before the next set piece. Unlike many action films, however, which transition from action beat to action beat with predictable slower moments in between, Speed only has about half the narrative pauses within its taut 116-minute runtime. Once Jack boards that bus, the film's pacing is relentless, as the story moves at high speed to its inevitable showdown conclusion. The script allows us to get to know Jack and Annie, and to a lesser extent Harry and the bus passengers, through their dialogue as the film progresses. It's amazing how well-written dialogue can impart as much information as somebody explaining what's going on does, and it's here that Speed excels. The characters might be somewhat generic for audiences today, but de Bont never allows us the time to figure that out as we're watching. Sure, nearly 20 years after the film premiered we might see it for what it is, but at the time we were more focused on the bus jumping that gap in the highway, as he lurches helter-skelter through the city. If there is any significant deficiency in the film, it's the ending. The ending of Speed, which sees Jack and Annie trapped in a train doing exactly the same thing as the bus, has a stupefyingly crappy fight between Jack and the bomber on the roof of the train. Not only is it poorly filmed, plenty of rear projection scenery here, folks, but it just lacks the fist-pumping throwdown we'd really like for someone who's put us through so much. And the way in which the train bursts out of the underground tunnel and onto a city street is just gapingly inane. That is almost, mind you, and does all the good work of the previous hour or so. Yeah, it's exciting in a way, but as the scene progresses and the logic of the film begins to unravel, you get the sense that even de Bont looked at this in post-production and thought, I'd better end this quick. Broken bar. So he does. Transferring the Speed concept from the bus to a train smacks of stretching credibility beyond the film's internal logic. Perhaps had they left the train element for a sequel, it might have worked, but to try and get both elements into the same film seems too much. In any case, it does provide a not over yet aspect that, on reflection, is quite cool to throw into the mix. And I guess it works to a point. Speed's raison d'etre is simply to entertain. And it does that really, really well. The star power of Reeves and Bullock is one that will have film junkies salivating these days, even if they were relatively untested at the time, and the ripping script from Yost delivers the same kind of gut-punch thrill Die Hard did 5 years earlier. Jan de Bont would go on to direct the equally thrilling, if entirely illogical, Twister, before his career spiraled into oblivion on the back of The Haunting and the terrible Tomb Raider sequel. Speed remains his defining film, a directorial debut that is both potent and thrilling. As a modern-day blockbuster, even by comparison to films which would come later, it stands the test of time and remains an utterly competent, extra-remarkable genre entry that deserves to be held in the same esteem as Die Hard and Lethal Weapon. Rodney has been writing about films for well over 2 decades, appreciates a good wine, the love of his wife and kids, and the affection of his dog and cats. He has a fondness of cheesy 90s action and classic Hollywood, hates that physical media is disappearing, and wishes somebody would make a high-budget series of the Never-ending story. A summary. A director, Andrew Niccol. Year of release, 2011. Principal cast, Justin Timberlake, Amanda Seyfried, Cillian Murphy, Olivia Wilde, Alex Pettyfer, Johnny Galecki, Vincent Kartheiser. Approx running time, 109 minutes. Synopsis: in the near future, time has replaced money as the predominant form of currency. You must earn more time or die suddenly, and society has become divided into classes, the time poor, and the time rich. When one young man, disenfranchised with society as a whole, is given nearly a century from somebody from the richer zones, he embarks on a mission to upset the balance of power and give those struggling day-to-day more time to live. What we think, High concept, lo-fi execution sees Justin Timberlake take on a lead role in a feature A and perform most admirably in the part. Nichols' usual visual acumen is superb, even if the dystopian future seems like it was filmed in the back alleys of LA. But the story perhaps isn't as strong as needed for a full feature A. It's a good enough way to pass a bit of time on a lazy afternoon if you're lazy, and you don't mind wasting an afternoon. It would be easy to describe director Andrew Niccol as something of an auteur. I doubt that's what he had in mind when he began his career in film, although I suspect he slipped into that niche almost by accident. It's no surprise to see his latest film, 2011's In Time, once more attempts to dissect our humanity in new and interesting ways within a science fiction framework. Nichols' previous directorial efforts, specifically Gattaca and S1M0 gave us glimpses into his reflective and analytical narrative methods, usually high-concept science fiction told in a subtle, intellectual way instead of the usual flashbang of Hollywood cliché. His films have usually met with critical acclaim, although perhaps not quite reaching the wide audience they deserved, due mainly to his less bombastic storytelling methods. In Time fits neatly into the well-worn mold of Gattaca, with a renegade human trying to buck and then change at the system in which humanity lives. Repressive control seems to be a continuing narrative hook for Niccol, and he's flexed his muscles once more to deliver a film both nearly thrilling and almost thought-provoking. Whether it fits into your traditional action thriller expectations isn't the point of this film. Niccol seems less inclined to deliver big-budget sequences of explosions and offer a more low-key approach, so keep that in mind going in. 150 years into the future, genetic engineering has altered humanity so that we stop aging at 25. Once we reach that year, we only have a further 12 months of life left, unless we obtain more time. Time is the new money in the future, and is bought, traded, stolen and used much like money is today. Although unlike money, if you don't have time then you don't have life. Implants in people's arms display the amount of time they have left. The lower social classes have less, while the richer people living in the utopian New Greenwich have ample. Some of the very rich have thousands of years of life to live. They're essentially immortal. Will Salah's, Justin Timberlake, an inhabitant of one of the ghettos, watches as his mother, Olivia Wilde, dies in his arms after failing to obtain enough time to make it through her 50th birthday. When he stumbles across a wanderer from one of the richer zones, who passes on over a century of time to Salas before committing suicide, Salas is given the power to change not only his own destiny, but that of everyone else living in the ghetto. Using his newfound wealth, he travels to New Greenwich, where he lives the life of a rich person, before the meeting mega-wealthy Philippe Weiss, Vincent Cartheiser, and his daughter, Sylvia, Amanda Seyfried. His acquisition of the extra time comes with a consequence, however. Salas is pursued into New Greenwich by a timekeeper, Raymond Leon, Cillian Murphy, who is intent on returning the stolen time to its rightful owner. Salas is also pursued by ghetto thug Fortis, Alex Pettyfer, who seeks to keep the balance of power within the ghetto. When he escapes New Greenwich with Sylvia as a hostage, Salas goes on a robbery spree to steal and distribute time to those who need it most, setting in motion a chain of events that will see the rich and powerful of New Greenwich seek to destroy them both. By the time the credits rolled, I had the sneaking suspicion I'd seen it before. The film, that is. I couldn't help that nagging feeling of déjà vu creeping over me, and before the credits finished, I knew what it was. In Time is a lot like any version of Robin Hood you've ever seen. A bandit, Salas, steals from the rich, Philippe, and gives to the poor, accompanied by a fair damsel, Sylvia, while being pursued by the sheriff, Raymond, and loved by the people. That's what this film boils down to. Sure, it skirts social commentary on how we live our lives as slaves to the almighty dollar, and how the ever-widening gap between rich and poor is a terrible indictment on human greed, but at its heart it's a retelling of Robin Hood. Not that I mind, of course, but don't let anybody tell you this film is something original. Where Niccol has succeeded in hoodwinking us, is in the execution. The ultra-modern society, mixed with the ghetto-like existence of the starving masses, and the unfair bias towards those with time to spend, is something we've seen before in many a sci-fi opus, But here Nickel attempts to present a more even-handed commentary than the concept might otherwise have asked. At its core, In Time is a thriller, with the constant running down of seconds on people's arms a reminder of the price we must all pay when our time is up. The hows and the whys aren't explained, and thank God for that, because to try doing so would reduce the film's already paper-thin internal science, and that's needed to keep the premise alive throughout the story. Robin Hood aside, In Time is hardly a swashbuckling sci-fi romp. It is decidedly low-key, a subtle, methodical film with an uneven heavy-handed subtext, albeit well filmed and produced. Don't go into this expecting explosions and running gun battles. Nickel handles what little action there with elegance, although he shrouds a lot of it in darkness and shadow, imbuing the film's stark visual aesthetic with a grimy, urine-stained tonality, bringing a ghastly pallor to a lot of the ghetto set sequences. Timberlake handles his role well, although his character isn't really that well-defined, at least, not by Nickel's standards. Salas has all this rage and anger, all this hostility, but the script seems intent to never develop his persona beyond just that, and I think this is where the film falls a little. Salas' relationship with Sylvia is a bizarre one. Nickel seems to want them to be romantically engaged, yet he seems to keep them at a distance emotionally, making the moments they do develop intimacy feel somewhat false, almost forced upon us. Seyfried is up to the task of the suitably hot future girl role, but she lacks spark with Timberlake on screen, and her character is frustratingly shallow. Her motivations for joining Salas on his spree are simplistic, almost one-dimensional, and Sylvia's change of heart once free of her father's protective clutches doesn't seem as emotional as I think it should. Cillian Murphy's character, the timekeeper, is a weird one. The film hints at larger things for him, and develops him as a major player, but as a character he's just another dude with a gun. The act of pursuing Salas, aside from the trigger of having excessive time, seems more important than the reason why Murphy seems like a fish out of water in this film, since his character should have had a harder edge to him, in contrast to Salas' fugitive failings. I think this is a case of Murphy being miscast in a role. I hate to say it, because I think Cillian's been brilliant in everything else I've seen him in. Far and away the best character in the film is Philip, played by Vincent Kartheiser. As the impossibly time-rich Philip, Kartheiser does a wonderfully sly turn that almost, mind you, outshines Timberlake. Kartheiser's smooth facial features, his ageless appearance, ensures his creep factor is high, while his character goes about a passionless, near-pointless lifestyle of parties and a broken bar living. Again, his character is pretty one-dimensional, although in the context of this film, Philip's relationship with Salas, and by extension Sylvia, is as close to a genuine arc as we get. Sharp-eyed observers will spot Alex Pettyfer as a thug getting about the ghetto, and much like the timekeeper, you get the sense that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than we actually see with him, but the film never allows us to see it. And it's always good to see Olivia Wilde in things. She's solid yet underwritten as Salas' mother. Big Bang Theory fans will also enjoy seeing Johnny Galecki as an unkempt neighbor and friend of Salas from the ghetto, although again his role is underwritten and his exit from the film is perfunctory. If there's a continuing theme in this review that could reflect my feelings about the movie, it's underdeveloped. Nickel's got plenty of ideas, it's just that In Time fails to maximize the use of them. Characters seem distant, almost aloof throughout, as if the emotion of the story has been sucked out somehow. The narrative flips between Salas and the timekeeper, and occasionally on Thordis and Philip, lacking a focus on just whose story is most important to tell. Here's a hint, it should be Salas. As an action thriller, it's passable in fits and spurts, while as a science fiction take on modern financial systems, it's heavy-handed and predictable. On the plus side, Timberlake and Seyfried aren't the ugliest people to watch for 90 minutes, and the story does move at a brisk pace, too brisk, if you ask me. There's no time for us to get to know the characters, so viewers with short attention spans might enjoy it. Those seeking a more enlightening film experience will feel shortchanged, not from the lack of ideas in the film, just from the somewhat anemic execution of them. In Time is a missed opportunity, and as such, there's a joke about getting that 90 minutes back that's just begging to come out. Claire over as Cinematic Delights says this, There are action scenes aplenty, though at times it does feel quite cliched. It is certainly one of those films where you can preempt what will happen. Nostra over at My Film Views thought it lost its way. The clocks under the skin look good and it's a believable system. It's not enough though to make it a good movie, and by the end of it I became disappointed. Jessica over at The Velvet Cafe thought it had a lot of squandered potential. In time is just average. It could have been brilliant. It could have raised all those questions that science fiction is so good at raising. About life, death and the meaning of all of it. Rodney has been writing about films for well over 2 decades, appreciates a good wine, the love of his wife and kids, and the affection of his dog and cats. He has a fondness of cheesy 90s action and classic Hollywood, hates that physical media is disappearing, and wishes somebody would make a high-budget series of the Never-ending story. A summary. A director, Ricky Gervais. Matthew Robinson. Year of release, 2009. Principal cast, Ricky Gervais, Jennifer Garner, Rob Lowe, Louis C.K., Jonah Hill, Tina Fey, Christopher Guest, Jeffrey Tambor, Fionnuala Flanagan. Approx running time, 90 minutes. Aspect ratio, 1.85 to 1. Synopsis. In a world where humans never developed the ability to lie, one man suddenly does. Instantly, his crappy life is transformed into a whirlwind of creativity, all designed to capture the heart of the woman he loves. What we think? A great concept for a film, ripe with ideas for skewering social norms, becomes a drab, melancholy chore. Gervais is funny enough, and he carries the film well, but the overall nasty nature of the material works against him. Imagine a world where nobody could lie. Hard? The invention of lying attempts to do just that, and for the most part succeeds in its brief, yet remains a one-joke film hammered into oblivion by an uneven narrative and genuinely unlikable characters. Ricky Gervais, Golden Globe host du jour, co-directs, co-writes, and stars in this romantic fantasy comedy that attempts to hold a mirror up to social taboos, while making pointed commentary on religion, dating, friendship and work. I think the basis of this film is fantastic. Such a great concept with plenty of potential for truly great comedic material. You'd think somebody with the razor-sharp comedic intellect of Gervais, and his cohort in this endeavor, Matthew Robinson, would create a sharp, satirical alternative to real life with plenty to say. Instead, this film reminded me of the single-note score to Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. A single note, hammered home time and again, offering little nuance, or respite from repetition, is the musical equivalent to the invention of lying. The comedy, while certainly sharply written, never deviates from the single-minded concept it exhibits, and as a result, growth within the story seems destined to failure. That being said, the film is worth at least one look. The world as we know it is different, an unparalleled world to our own, where humanity has never developed the ability to lie. Society is stuck in a perpetual rut of predictability. Without the ability to lie, creative thinking is non-existent, meaning things like art, film, music and television exist purely to portray history to the masses as entertainment. Films, for example, are historical records read on screen by celebrity actors, purely factual and missing any creativity whatsoever. Mark Bullison, Ricky Gervais, writes historical narratives for the 13th century time period, otherwise known as the Century of the Black Plague. After being fired by his boss, and rejected by the woman he has eyes for, Mark's life spirals out of his control, until he makes the unthinkable decision to a broken bar not tell the truth. Realizing that he has the ability to say something that isn't he because the words truth and lie don't exist in this world, Mark's world opens up to enormous possibilities. He becomes something of a messiah figure, after comforting his dying mother, Fionnuala Flanagan, with his imaginative description of heaven, although once more, the concept of a deity or an afterlife is unknown to the world. Mark hones his ability to deceive others by trying to do good, although often for his own benefit. The woman who rejected him, Anna, Jennifer Garner, is hell-bent on finding a perfect genetic mate for children, leading her to find Mark's rival screenwriter Brad Kessler, Rob Lowe, more suitable than Mark. Spurned, slipping into depression and realizing that being able to lie isn't always the right answer, Mark must face up to the fact that while he may not be able to single-handedly change the world, he can change himself for the better. The Invention of Lying is a clever film. It's a high-concept comedy, with a tinge of romance. Although, if I was brutally honest, what on earth Gervais' character find attractive in Garner's snooty, uppity Anna is beyond me, and some brutally funny moments of spot-on sarcasm about society. Yet, for all the hilarity dotted throughout the story, there's long stretches of uneventful, frustratingly slow, character development. Now, normally this would be something I'd herald as one of the better things in any film, but with Lying, the script spends more time trying to develop characters that unfortunately can't develop due to not being able to lie, and it's this element that brings the whole movie undone. The somewhat nasty nature of absolute truth-telling, warts and all, begins to wear out its welcome quite quickly, which I wouldn't have expected, and by the end, you just want somebody, hell anybody, to be able to feel the emotional freedom enjoyed by Mark the majority of the movie. While Mark's the main character, the sheer inability of Anna to develop beyond her single character arc limits the emotional connection between her and Mark, and consequently, them and us. The Invention of Lying is a clever film. It's a high-concept comedy, with a tinge of romance. Although, if I was brutally honest, what on earth Gervais' character find attractive in Garner's snooty, uppity Anna is beyond me, and some brutally funny moments of spot-on sarcasm about society. Yet, for all the hilarity dotted throughout the story, there's long stretches of uneventful, frustratingly slow, character development. Now, normally this would be something I'd herald as one of the better things in any film, but with Lying, the script spends more time trying to develop characters that unfortunately can't develop due to not being able to lie, and it's this element that brings the whole movie undone. The somewhat nasty nature of absolute truth-telling, warts and all, begins to wear out its welcome quite quickly, which I wouldn't have expected, and by the end, you just want somebody, hell anybody, to be able to feel the emotional freedom enjoyed by Mark the majority of the movie. While Mark's the main character, the sheer inability of Anna to develop beyond her single character arc limits the emotional connection between her and Mark, and consequently, them and us. Rough the film to add a dash of legitimacy to Gervais' first directorial effort. Alongside various comedy and acting luminaries, leading man Ricky Gervais does a solid job as Mark, the everyman placed into an extraordinary situation. Whether you find Gervais a comedian to be avoided or not, there's no denying his ability to deliver a performance when it counts, and there are times during this film when it does count. Jennifer Garner is probably the weakest link in the film, as far as comedy chops goes, and her screen chemistry with Gervais is non-existent, something I found disappointing. Rob Lowe seems to be the only one in on the joke, and he plays it up superbly, while hangers-on Jonah Hill and Louis C.K. do their best to do their least. Jeffrey Tambor always fails to disappoint, and usurps every scene he has with Gervais for the sake of great comedy. Somehow, and this is the strangest bit, the cast all deliver their lines and performances with the utmost skill, and yet the film still feels devoid of passion, perhaps reflecting the ambivalent characters through the movie. Indeed, most of the characters in the film are generally unlikable, almost as if they're designed to make us hate them, Mark being the one exception, and if that's the tone Gervais and CO were aiming for, they skewered the bullseye and left room for more. I found it so hard to enjoy any of the characters in this film, and my enjoyment of the film waned the further things went along. Heavy-handed snarkiness aside, I'm hard-pressed to recommend The Invention of Lying wholeheartedly. There's moments which make the film worthwhile, such as the truly hilarious sequence when Mark delivers a referential Ten Commandments to a waiting crowd, but the overall truth at all costs mantra of the film works against the story rather than for it. While the idea of the film may seem hilarious, and indeed it actually is, the reality is that telling the truth regardless of the outcome is borderline dull. While a few laughs spring up when kids get called fat and people are told they're just shit, The Invention of Lying remains a curiosity in the career of Ricky Gervais, and one I doubt I'll be revisiting anytime soon. There are some laughs, you just have to go a long way to find them. Dan at Top 10 Films made this assessment: the film isn't half as funny as it should be, or half as intelligent as it thinks it is. Colin Biggs, over at Nevermind Pop Film, took more out of the film than I did. The fact that line isn't a strict comedy probably did it in for a lot of people expecting this to be a full-on comedy that instead aims more for your head than your gut. Nostra at my film views come straight out with it. Despite the initial laughs, this movie left me disappointed, and it's a movie which I really don't recommend watching. The guys over at Movie Brothers thought it was okay. It's a clever concept and goes into places that are very honest. For instance, there is no religion or creative thought. Stevie at Cinematic Paradox didn't think much of it. I wouldn't say the invention of lying worked as a funny comedy. It was underwhelming and contrived, falling flat of the expectations set by its top-notch comedy cast. Unfortunate, because this could have been a cracker of a comedy. Disagree with what we've written? Seen the film and want to comment? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Rodney has been writing about films for well over 2 decades, appreciates a good wine, the love of his wife and kids, and the affection of his dog and cats. He has a fondness of cheesy 90s action and classic Hollywood, hates that physical media is disappearing, and wishes somebody would make a high-budget series of the never-ending story. 6 overall grade, A classic popcorn flick from the summer of 1994. Synopsis: an LAPD detective will board a bus rigged with a bomb set to detonate if the speed drops below 50 miles per hour, while the maniacal bomber watches from afar. My thoughts before the days comic book movies took over and began to rule the summer box office. It was over-the-top action films that fit the bill. In the summer of 1994, Keanu Reeves' Speed and Arnold's True Lies shared top of the action ranks. Sure, you may think a 8.0 rating may be a little on the high side, but to this day the film still holds its own in regards of action. The story is creative, fun, pulse-pounding, and delivered all you need from a mindless action adventure that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Once the film gets going, it never stops, and the script keeps a great flow to reel in your interest from start to finish. Without question, there are some cheesy moments, a few horrible delivered lines, and some ridiculously implausible scenarios, but who cares? It's all in the fun. And watching a massive bus jumps across a conveniently missing section of a freeway will get your blood flowing regardless of its absurdity. The cast is great. Keanu was perfect for the role and easily filled the shoes of a leading man in this action romp. Jeff Daniels was a nice side character and had some amusing back and forths with Reeves' character. Not to forget Sandra Bullock, who used this role to springboard her career to stardom with a charming performance. Dennis Hopper was also excellent as the crazy bomber, and his portrayal gave the film a fun antagonist. For a night with a fun-filled and never-ending action story with characters you can root for, Speed still delivers. From tense, to adrenaline-filled scenes to action-packed and dramatic scenarios, this one has it all. Many will think making a blockbuster action film is easy, and while certain aspects of that may be true, making it an enjoyable one is not so easy. Just look how the sequel to this one turned out. 7. This episode of Revisited was written by Cody Hammond, narrated by Gaius Spoling, edited by Juan Jimenez, produced by Adam Walton and Chris Bumbray, and executive produced by Burj Garabedian. It could have been a disaster. A first-time director handling an action movie that was supposed to be exciting while taking place primarily on a bus moving through LA traffic. A lead role that had been rejected by most of the biggest stars of the time, whittling the options down to an actor best known for playing a goofball teenager. A prominent supporting cast member who made it clear he thought they were making a piece of crap. The studio didn't have the highest hopes for this movie, A Broken Bar, but it turned out to be a major hit when it was released in the summer of 1994, and to this day it's considered to be one of the best action movies ever made. The movie is Speed, and it's time for this one to be revisited. Setup: we really owe the existence of Speed to the fact that writer Graham Yost had been given an inaccurate description of what the 1985 film Runaway Train was about. Yost had heard that the train couldn't stop because there was a bomb on it, but when he saw the movie, he found that there was no bomb. The train was just out of control because it didn't have brakes or an engineer. He enjoyed Runaway Train as it was, but that bomb idea stuck with him, and he decided to write his own screenplay about a vehicle that couldn't stop because there was an explosive on board. Instead of a train, he decided to put the bomb on a bus. The story doesn't begin on the bus, though. It begins in an office building, where the bomber traps a group of innocent civilians inside an elevator and demands that the city fork over $3 million. If he doesn't get paid, he'll set off more charges that will send the elevator crashing to the ground 30 stories below. Enter our hero, young LAPD SWAT officer Jack Traven, who with the help of fellow SWAT officer Harry Temple manages to save the hostages and ruin the ransom plan. Jack is also able to deduce that the bomber has been monitoring the situation from inside the building, a broken bar, and after a confrontation, the bomber appears to blow himself up. The bomber isn't really dead at that point. Otherwise Speed would have been a short film. He's still out there. He still wants to receive $3 million in exchange for some hostages, and now he's interested in messing with Jack as well. So when he places a bomb on the bottom of a mass transit bus, he calls Jack to let him know about the bomb, tells him exactly which bus it's on, and tells him how it works. The bomb will be activated once the bus hits the speed of 50 miles per hour, and will detonate if it ever drops below 50 after that. In Yost's first draft of the script, the speed the bus couldn't drop below was just 20 miles per hour. A friend advised him to change it, correctly feeling that 20 was too slow for an action movie. Can you imagine watching a movie where we're supposed to be thrilled by the sight of a large vehicle cruising along at 21 miles per hour? Of course, the bus hits 50 before Jack can warn the driver and passengers. Then the movie becomes all about trying to make sure the bus stays above 50 while driving around a city that is known for its traffic jams. It has to maintain speed long enough for Jack to figure out how to save the people on board, whether that means defusing the bomb or getting the passengers off the vehicle and letting it blow up. Problem is, the bomber is watching, and has said he will detonate the bomb as soon as he sees any attempt to remove the passengers. Yost managed to sell his script to Paramount at a time when the studio was trying to turn martial artist Jeff Speakman into the next big action star. Speakman had a 3-picture deal with them that started with The Perfect Weapon in 1991, and for a while it looked like Speed was going to be his second Paramount movie. Not only did that not happen, but Jeff Speakman's second Paramount movie never came at all. And while the studio liked this bomb on a bus script well enough to buy it, they also had an unexpected issue with it. They felt there was too much time spent on the bus. Yost's story ended when the bus situation was resolved. Paramount didn't want to ride the bus all the way to the end credits, so they asked Yost to switch things up in the third act, and he wrote a new action sequence set in the subway. This subway sequence still feels kind of tacked on in the finished film, but it's what Paramount wanted. Even though Paramount didn't end up making the movie, Speed actually happened at 20th Century Fox, the studio that picked up the project after Paramount set it aside. This being a Fox production makes a lot of sense, because the film is often referred to as Die Hard on a Bus, and Fox is the home of the Die Hard franchise. Fox asked Die Hard director John McTiernan to take the helm of this movie, but he turned it down. It ended up being passed over to McTiernan's Die Hard cinematographer Jan de Bont, who was interested in making his feature directorial debut after almost 30 years in the business. When he first heard that most of the script was set on a bus, he was concerned that it would be boring, but as he read through it he began to see how he could make it work. Fox received more rejections once they started searching for someone to play Jack Traven. Apparently they offered the role to all the usual action suspects and were turned down. That's how we end up with Keanu Reeves in the lead role. In the special features on the DVD and Blu-ray releases of the film, there's a lot of talk that makes it sound like Speed was Reeves' first experience in the action genre. De Bont says he had to convince him that making an action movie could be fun and coach him to embrace his inner action hero. It's said that the studio still saw Reeves as the guy from Bill Ted's Excellent Adventure and worried that he couldn't handle action. This is very odd, because Speed was not Reeves' first action movie. He had already starred in Point Break, which was a big hit for Fox and proved to them that he could handle action 3 years before this. Well, if they still didn't have faith in Reeves when Speed went into production, he certainly went on to prove himself all over again, sporting some added muscle and a haircut so short that it was another thing to cause the studio anxiety. Reeves gives a terrific action hero performance in the film. De Bont also surrounded him with an awesome supporting cast, from Jeff Daniels as Harry Temple and Joe Morton as their superior Lieutenant Mac to Alan Ruck, Beth Grant, Carlos Carrasco, and Hawthorne James as people on the bus. After Halle Berry, Ellen DeGeneres, and a long list of others were considered, Sandra Bullock was cast in the role of Annie Porter, the bus passenger who ends up having to drive the bus and becomes Jack's love interest along the way. Bullock was a rising star at the time, having just worked with Sylvester Stallone on Demolition Man, and this movie boosted her career to a whole new level. Glenn Plummer has a fun role as the guy who helps Jack catch up to the bus, and then we have the villain. Yost originally planned for Speed to have a shocking twist where we would find out that the bomber was just the sidekick to the real bad guy, Jack's own friend Harry. The role of Harry was offered to the likes of Ed Harris and Randy Quaid when this idea was in play, but before filming began the studio said they only wanted there to be one bad guy from beginning to end. So Harry got to remain a noble character throughout, and Dennis Hopper was cast as the bomb-making madman Howard Payne, a perfect casting that allowed Hopper to play unhinged in his own wonderfully unique way. Review: Speed seems to be one of the occasions where the deluge of studio notes actually helped improve the movie. For the most part, they had a solid script in place as the project headed into production, and a then virtually unknown Joss Whedon was brought in to punch up the dialogue and do some character tweaks that were also beneficial. Jan de Bont then proceeded to show that working as cinematographer on movies directed by action masters like John McTiernan and Richard Donner had trained him to be a hell of an action director himself. Fitting its title, Speed moves fast, that opening elevator sequence gets your blood pumping right away, and de Bont makes sure there aren't many quieter scenes to bring your excitement level down as the film goes on. Within 7 minutes of the elevator sequence ending, there has already been another explosion and Howard Payne is telling Jack about the bomb on the bus. The threat to bus number 2525 is established by the 30-minute mark, and a full hour is dedicated to Jack trying to save the people on that bus. Sure, an hour is a lot of time to spend focused on a bus, but de Bont and the writers never let this stretch of the film get dull. They throw a constant barrage of complications at Jack and the bus passengers, starting with the fact that Jack has to get on the bus himself. Keeping the bus at 50 means needing to smash through traffic jams, take hard turns, nearly run down inattentive pedestrians. One of the passengers is a criminal who freaks out when Jack gets on the bus and ends up accidentally shooting the driver, a change from Yost's first draft, where the driver had a heart attack just like the engineer in Runaway Train. The driver being injured is why Bullock's character Annie, who just lost her driver's license, has to take the wheel. It was de Bont who suggested the most famous complication of all. Lieutenant Mack advises Jack and Annie to get the bus onto the 105 freeway, which at the time of filming had just been completed but wasn't in use yet. Mack just neglected to realize that construction of the freeway wasn't entirely finished. There's a 50-foot gap looming ahead of the bus. This 50-foot gap did not exist in reality. De Bont thought it up and it was created on screen through the use of some early digital trickery. And it's quite an obstacle for a bus that can't slow down or turn around. All they can do is hit the gas and hope they're going fast enough to be able to jump 50 feet. Decades down the line, this doesn't sound like a big deal. A bus could make a 50-foot jump in the middle of a Fast Furious movie and it would just be one action beat surrounded by 100 other stunts that are just as big, if not bigger and more ridiculous. But this jump was something spectacular at the time, the big, standout moment that everyone was talking about during the summer of 1994. Although the gap wasn't real, the stunt was. A bus going 61 miles per hour was ramped through the air and went higher and further than the crew was expecting. A camera was smashed. Part of the bus unexpectedly went out of frame, but they got the shot. In reality, Annie wouldn't have been able to drive the bus very well anymore after making this jump, because the tires blew out on the stunt bus, but in the movie the bus comes out of it just fine. Watching the movie now, it's kind of surprising to see that the coverage of this stunt is rather modest. We don't even see a shot of the bus actually clearing the gap, we just see it jumping from one side and landing on the other broken bar, but that's what was possible for them to convincingly show at the time. De Bont also takes credit for deciding to have the bus drive on the runways at the Lax airport, but there's some disagreement over who actually came up with that idea. Whoever suggested it gave the movie a more interesting location than alternative options that would have had the bus driving in circles around Dodger Stadium or a racetrack. It also allows a plane to get involved with the action before we move on to the climactic set piece in the subway. Yost is no fan of the subway sequence, still feeling that the movie truly ends as soon as the bus situation is resolved via broken bar, but it does provide a cool setting for the final confrontation between Jack and Howard. The problem with the subway sequence, the reason why it comes off as being poorly thought out and repetitious, is the fact that the exact same thing happens in the subway as we just saw happen on the freeway. The subway system is under construction and the speeding train Jack and Annie are on is heading down a track that hasn't been completed. All they can do is accelerate and jump the track. This is the sort of how can the same thing happen to the same people twice event you'd expect to see in a sequel, but instead we're seeing it happen just a little while later in the same movie. The subway sequence doesn't damage the overall film. It's just not on the level of what came before it. While de Bont made Speed a 116-minute adrenaline rush, the cast has to be commended for the performances they give in the midst of all the action. Reeves plays Jack Traven like a hero with a heart of gold. Not only is he tough, smart, and capable, we also see that he's so dedicated to his job because he truly cares about the people he's trying to save. There's a lot of warmth to Jack, and it's easy to understand why Annie falls for him during their time together. Bullock also makes the love interest angle work while making Annie a very likable character. She's in way over her head, but with Jack's help she's able to be heroic as well. Jeff Daniels is endearing as Harry Temple, the partner and mentor who quizzes Jack about scenarios they might find themselves in while at work, setting up Howard Payne's famous line, "Pop quiz, hot shot." Daniels is the cast member who thought they were making a piece of crap during filming, figuring this was just another run-of-the-mill action movie. But as time went on, he began to realize they were working on something special. We come to care for Harry so much that he's involved in one of the most emotionally effective moments of the movie, which we wouldn't have gotten if they had stuck to the plan of making him the surprise villain. And Dennis Hopper broken bar. It's always a joy to watch Dennis Hopper act crazy. Legacy/now. It's baffling, but somehow Fox wasn't convinced they had a crowd pleaser on their hands with Speed, so they were originally planning to push it into theaters at the end of summer, in August of 1994. It wasn't until they saw the positive scores from test screenings that they started to see the film's potential, and then they decided to have Speed kick off their summer movie slate with a June release. That release date shift paid off. Made on a budget somewhere in the range of $30 to $37 million. Speed earned about 10 times more than it cost, with its worldwide box office total surpassing $350 million. With a return on investment like that, it's no surprise that Fox wanted a sequel. Unfortunately, that sequel was a mess. While Bullock and de Bont returned for 1997's Speed 2, Cruise Control, Reeves opted out and the script was lacking, coming off more like an underwhelming version of an old-school disaster movie. It's quite dull compared to the frenetic action of the first film, building up to the sight of a cruise ship slowly smashing into a seaside town. Expensive, but not exactly thrilling. Speed 2 had a budget more than 3 times bigger than its predecessors and ended up making less than half of what Speed made at the box office. Speed 2 is often named as one of the worst sequels ever made, but that doesn't do anything to tarnish the reputation of the first Speed. Not only was Speed a financial success, it also went over very well with critics, and it remains a highly popular and respected film. It ranks among the best movies of the action genre, with Empire magazine putting it on their list of the 500 greatest movies of all time. Some things about it seem a little quaint now, but in a way that makes you sort of wistful, as we could use more action movies that are like this these days. Speed still holds up as a very entertaining viewing experience and stands the test of time thanks to a great cast that brought to life likable and memorable characters, a good script with a gripping concept, well-shot action sequences that are exciting and involving, and a fast pace. What worked in 1994 still works perfectly today.